All right, hi there guys. We are looking at part 2 of our quadratic and square root A transformations. The last video we talked about how if it's bigger than 1, that makes the graph more narrow. If it is between 0 and 1, that makes the graph become a little bit flatter, or we have that vertical compression. So we're going to take a look now at the actual sign of A. Previously in the last video, we only cared about the positive version of that number. Now we actually do care about the sign. All we care about, is it positive or is it negative? That's what I care about this time. Not the actual number itself, just whether the number is positive or negative. All right, so let's take a look now at our quadratic. We'll start with that one like we did with the other videos. Again, all I care about is the A value. Okay, all I care about is that A. So right now with our original parent function that we have here, when A is positive, sorry guys, looks like my pen's dying a little bit. When A is positive, that's when you have the graph that opens up. Okay, that's all the positive A, the positive version of that number tells us is that the graph opens up. Now, when that A becomes negative, A is negative. That's what makes the graph open down. Now, when it actually does open down, when the A number is in fact negative, we call that a reflection over the x-axis. Because in fact, all it did was flip over the x. It didn't flip over the y, it flipped over the x. What went up is now pointing down. So let's see what happens when we actually throw in a real example here that we're gonna graph. So we have our original equation here, and like before, we'll use our original points that we started off and talked about in last video, x and y. So we had -2 and 4. -1 and 1, 0, 0, +1, 1, and +2, 4. And so there's our original. Right now, our A is positive. And from the equation, my A is the understood 1 in front of that x squared, +1, meaning it's going to open up. So let's see what happens when we have a negative now in front of that. So this time we're looking at a negative x squared, which in fact is a -1x. So A is -1. So that tells me my graph should open downwards. So we're going to take those same idea we took from last video, getting our coordinates, and we're going to multiply them. So we had a -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. We had a 4, 1, 0, 1, and 4. Sorry about that. My dogs are always excited about math. And we're going to take each of these and, like we did before, multiply by a -1, because again, that's our A value. So when we make our new table, those x values are going to stay the same. So -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. But each of those y values times a -1, which means our signs are going to change on most of these points, all but the 0, of course. So this time my graph, -2, -4, -1, -1, 0, 0, 1, -1, and 2, -4. So this time we are negative, we open down. The size hasn't changed, because the A is still just a positive 1 or a negative 1. It's not bigger or smaller than that. So we're just talking about reflecting over the X. So the same thing is going to happen with a square root. Okay, the same thing is going to happen with the square root. Now, here's where it's a little different. When our A is positive, that's when you have the top portion of that square root graph that we looked at last video. This square root graph has the positive or negative A that's there. So when A is positive, you get the top portion of the graph. When A is negative, oh, sorry guys, my pen is dying. When our A value becomes that negative number, that is what gets us the other side of that sideways U. And together, the two pieces are what make the entire sideways U shape. The top portion, the top section, is for the positive A. The bottom section is for the negative A. But again, it's still a reflection over the x-axis. Okay, it's still a reflection. So I'm going to draw just one extra grid down here on the bottom, and we're going to put those two pieces together. So again, there is the positive A side, and now we have the negative A side. So together again, that's where you get that sideways U shape or the square root graph. Now, when it comes to graphing these, the same thing is going to happen with our table of values. We'll start with our original points that we saw just like in the last video. So our X and our Y, we had 0, 1, and 4, 0, 1, and 2 for the Y's. And again, we're going to multiply only the Y numbers. And again, we're going to multiply by what the A is. So when we look at a negative A value, like before, a negative 1 in this case, we're going to multiply those same Y numbers by a negative 1. So let's get our original ones up here. So my X, my Y, 0, 1, 4, and 0, 1, 2. I'm going to go ahead and just for the moment squeeze in what I can. There's the top side of that, the A positive side. We're going to take all of these Y numbers, multiply by the negative 1. So my new points that I'm going to graph, 0, 1, 4 stays the same. 0 times negative 1, guess what? Still 0. 1 times negative 1 is a negative 1. And then 2 times negative 1, a negative 2. And there is the negative A side of this. And again, the two pieces together, the positive side and the negative side, are what make the entire graph. So I want to put all of these together, the stretch, the compression, and now the reflection. And let's try a couple examples and finish off the last part of these notes. All right, so we have the equation f of x equals negative 4x squared. So we're going to fill in the blank. The parent, this is a quadratic. Whoops, that's a little small there. Let's clean that up, make it a little bit easier to read. So the quadratic function was, let's get the A value. All right, so my A for this picture is, for this equation, is a negative 4. So again, the negative part takes care of the reflection. So it was reflected over the x-axis. That's for the negative part. And then I need the 4. 4 is bigger than 1. So, and it was vertically, if I could spell, sorry, vertically stretched by 4. So we're putting everything together now. Let's try another one. Again, start with what your A value is. It's still negative 2/3. So A is negative, which right away tells me reflected over your x-axis. Then the rest of the number, 2/3, tells me the stretch or the compression. And in this case, this is a vertical or vertically compressed. By 2/3. The last thing I need to know which parent function this was. They have an x squared, so this is quadratic. All right, let's do the last two. All right, h of x is -3 square root of x. So everything we need is in the words. So I have -3, so let's get your A. The parent square root was, again, A is negative, so reflected. Over the x-axis. And then 3 for -3, 3 is bigger than 1, so this is vertically stretched. By whatever that number was, so by 3. All right, last one. All right, j of x is equal to -1/4 square root x. So there we go. This is a square root. Okay, let's get our A value, the number in front of that square root that I said first. So my A is negative, which means reflected over the x-axis, -1/4, which again, you can take that to the decimal. That's the same as a 0.25. That's less than 1. So this is vertically compressed. By 1/4. All right, so I hope you guys learned a little bit about the sign of A and what that does to your graph. Just remember, if it is negative, that does reflect it over the x-axis. The actual number itself tells you the compression, or it tells you the stretch. And if your graph is going to be narrow or if it's going to be wider. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the last video, and please don't hesitate to ask any questions you guys might have over the notes. Thanks and have a great day.